Morning, everyone. Good morning again to some of you. I want to thank everyone for participating in the services today. Thank you for the prayers of encouragement for me and for the service. And thank you, James, for those songs. I caught myself trying to catch my breath a little bit in that last song. I'm not used to singing. We attend services in Ohio. They kind of turn down the speed a little bit of the song, so it's nice to come back to Kentucky and speed it up. They caught me off guard, but it's good to see all of you. It's good to be with you again. We talked a little bit this morning about this service, I guess, on this day particularly, because it's been right at about a year that this building has been here. This new sort of congregation name, the South Mayo Church of Christ, has been here, and your elders thought it would be interesting to kind of honor that, to remember that, and kind of talk a bit about what we as a group of Christians that we know as a local church and what it is that you're supposed to do here as the South Mayo Church of Christ. This morning we talked about your mission being evangelism and doing that here in this community. How best to do that by ensuring that your attitude was right. How do we adjust our attitude in order to win souls to Christ? But another thing I want us to be reminded about, and I think it's really important for us to understand, is what's going on around us. And that is a spiritual war. It's something we don't really like to think about. War is probably the ugliest of things that happens in human existence, but it's certainly something that's going on right now. When's the last time that you as a Christian, you as a congregation, have thought about spiritual warfare? Answers will vary for each of you, but I think in view of a lot of the violence that we've seen over the last, 5 or 6 months in this country, I can remember not too long ago there was someone who drove their vehicle through a church in Michigan, and it killed like 5 people, injured 8 others, and if I'm not mistaken, the entire building burnt down. I think maybe the week before that you had a prominent American political figure and spiritual leader who was assassinated on live television. And not long after that, you had someone else, I think at a church in Minneapolis, they fired a high-powered rifle through the windows of a classroom where children were worshiping God and learning about God. That's just in the last few months. I mean, when I see stuff like that, which is hard for many of us to imagine in some ways, I see evil. And when I see evil, I see spiritual warfare going on. And I think it's something that we see is this invisible war that's happening, that this is the visible part of it. This is Satan openly and brazenly doing what he has come to do, which is rip people apart and destroy them. Revelation chapter 12 really pulls back the curtain on the war that's going on in what I call the spiritual domain, in the unseen. The dragon that's depicted in Revelation, which of course represents the devil, is in his death throes. And he wages war against the people of God. And we can see it sometimes manifest in our life. And that's why in 1 Peter chapter 5, we are warned about the devil and how the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And much of the time, again, I think as Christians, even though we know that to be true, we bury our heads in the proverbial sand to not really think about it because it's ugly. And I think that's something we really need to change. And again, though this war is something that's raging in the unseen, it doesn't mean that it's imaginary. It's very, very real. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5 says this: For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war against the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and every thought captive to obey Christ. There are 2 things I want you to understand about this verse. The first is that you are engaged in a war. Whether you want to be, whether you think you are or not, it's just a fact. You are in a spiritual war. And the second thing you need to understand is that this war, the battlefield of that war, is in your heart and in your mind. That's the battlefield. We need to be conscious of that. But here's the good news about this war. I was going to save this to the end, but I'm just going to tell you the end right now. The war is over. Over. Okay? It's done. The devil lost. He's lost. That's why in Revelation it talks about his death throes. He's falling. He's trying to scratch and crawl and bring everybody he can with him until he hits the ground, because Christ has won the war. The victory is secure. We are not fighting in this war to secure victory or find victory. We are fighting from victory, a victory Jesus has already given. So let's lay that out very clearly. We're going to talk more about the spiritual battle that's going on, how you're not alone in that battle, how God through Christ has given us formidable weapons, as it says in this verse, to fight that battle, and how we can go about to better understand ourselves and understand our enemy. There's a really old book. It's about 3,000 years old. It's called The Art of War. That's why I named this lesson this. And it was written by a Chinese general named Sun Tzu. And I can remember very early on in my education in college, at the Naval Academy, you eventually find out what service you're going to join. Most people went to the Navy. I went to the Marine Corps, and we got to meet then three-star General James Mattis, who you probably know was recently Secretary of Defense. When he was a three-star general, he came and talked to all of the people that service-selected Marines. We were excited. We wanted to hear, about this guy. We wanted to hear from him. And he said, one person asked him a question. The same question that was burning in my mind was, hey, look, I'm like 20 years old, 21, 22 years old. I'm about to be made a commissioned officer and a lieutenant. I've got to lead other men and women, other Marines, and I don't know anything. I don't really know anything. I'm too young. I don't have that experience. Sir, how best would you advise us to deal with that? And he just basically said, yeah, look, you're right. There's nothing you can do about being 22. That's just the way it is. But what you can do is have a 3,000-year-old mind. And what he meant by that is that warfare has been written about for 3,000 years. And that you need to download all that information. If you're not reading so many books a year to try to get yourself square with your profession, then you're doing yourself and your Marines, who you'll be leading, a disservice. And the first book he mentions for us to read is this book called by Sun Tzu, called The Art of War. And I want to use that book to kind of tease out some of the spiritual things that are going on in this warfare. Because one of the first things that Sun Tzu says is that if you know the enemy and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. But if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And this is why this book is required reading for Marine officers. Again, it's 3,000 years old. You may think, what can I possibly learn about modern-day warfare from that old book? Well, you read that and tell me if that's not true. How about, is that true in your spiritual life? How well do you know yourself? I know myself. It's me. Okay. How well do you know the enemy? How often do you think about the enemy? I'll admit, I try not to think about him very often. It's not pleasant. I get it. But like this says, and I think it's absolutely true, if you don't know yourself, if you don't know the enemy, you will succumb in every battle. So let's talk a little bit about who we are first. Turn to 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. Because here we're told in 1 Peter chapter 5 and in verse 8, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. First and foremost, you need to be sober-minded and be watchful because you have an adversary. You need to understand that. You have someone who is against you personally. You personally. He prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone, and you are that someone. And this isn't a metaphor. This is a warning. This is true. Satan doesn't just want you. He wants your marriage. He wants your children. He wants your faith. He wants your soul. And he wants to make you impotent and useless for the cause of Christ. All he wants to do is make you suffer in misery and defeat. That is his intent, and that is his goal. And pause and look around at all the fallout we see from this spiritual warfare. We can all see it if we're paying attention. Think about the broken homes, the people enslaved to addiction. You can see that as just chance and random physical acts of things, or you can see it for what it is. And that is the physical manifestation of this spiritual war that we're in. And our lives can be really hard fought. I mean, spiritually. I mean, sometimes it is just in the trenches, head to head, toe to toe, hand to hand combat. The bloodiest of fights. Every inch along your spiritual journey sometimes feels contested. And that's what the devil does. This is the daily reality for Christians because you are a target. You have an adversary. Some of you may be under attack right now. And a lot of you, if you are under attack, I would bet a lot of you are just doing it in silence. You keep your head down. You don't want people to know. You hide it behind a smile or a mask. You want to believe that no one knows what's going on, but God knows what's going on. God knows. And I would urge you to let your fellow brothers and sisters know as well because they are here to help you fight. We have allies all around us. And you can use them to help you fight and win. That's why I think James says in James chapter 5 and verse 16, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, that you may be what? Healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. Don't fight this war alone. That's the first thing we need to know about ourselves. You cannot do it alone. Can't. Not like, maybe I can try. No, you can't do it alone. That's why we have Jesus, and that's why we have each other. And if you do it with Christ in mind, with the weapons that God has given us, and the allies that he has given us, that is the other Christians at your left and to your right, you can do it. It is possible, but it's the only way. And that matters because we don't just want peace for the moment, we want peace for eternity. So we need to keep eternity in view. I think this is very helpful. That we're not just, sometimes it feels like I'm doing this thing today just to get through today. And that's true. Sometimes we have to just put our head down and get past lunch. But it helps to understand that there's eternity in view, that there's a goal, there's a place that I'm trying to go, an end state that I'm trying to meet. If you can keep that in your windshield, it makes every battle, every attack, every fight for your soul a little bit easier. So let's talk a little bit about the weapons that we have at our disposal, because you may say, okay, I agree with you, there's a war, but what am I supposed to do? I mean, I go out there every day and the devil's bigger than me, he's meaner than me, and he just wins all the time. What am I supposed to do to fight back? Well, you do have something. Everybody's probably heard these verses, Ephesians chapter 6. I'm going to start with a couple verses earlier than that. Let's talk about the very effective weapons that God's given us. Finally, be strong in the Lord and his weakness. His meekness. No, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. The whole armor of God standing in his strength. Look, I think verse 11 tells us that we have an imperative, a responsibility. What is it? Stand. Stand. How do you stand? Well, you need to be prepared. You can't stand if you're not prepared, and we get prepared with that armor of God that he's given us. Behind everything is Christ in this armor. It's not an if Satan's coming after you. It's not an if. He's coming. Okay? So let's pull back the curtain on that. If you think you're impervious, if you think it's not going to happen to me, you're wrong. You're setting yourself up for failure. You need to prepare yourself to stand. Look at verse 12. For we do not wrestle with flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. That's the fight that you're doing. I don't know, every time I read these things, cosmic powers, present darkness, spiritual forces of evil, I get pretty scared. You know, though physical fighting is scary in and of itself, that terrifies me. That battlefield is terrifying. If it's not to you, I think you need to check your pulse. That's terrifying. And I would not want to try to fight it without this armor. And it's not that this is new to us. Evil has always been a thing. It may feel like it's new to us because of the state of our media and how we can just consume so much from everywhere all the time. But it's not new. It's always been there. And it's been studying us, learning about us, what it is that makes us tick. Where are our flaws? We need to have this armor on to be ready. We'll go through this really quickly. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Again, to stand. Take your stand. Verses 14 through 18. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth. Truth. You can't stand against the father of lies if you don't have the truth. Period. That's why I have to be in the Word. I have to come be with fellow Christians whenever I can to make sure I know the truth that God is calling me to. And we have to let the truth mold us and shape us and belt us to the firmness that God has given us. And having put on the breastplate of righteousness, think about living a holy life. Living a holy life. And that holy life just guarding you and guarding what is vital, your heart, from the weapons of the enemy. And as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. When I think about this, some of the translations may say shoes of the gospel. My translation says readiness. Think about stability. The gospel being that firm footing for this fight. This is not uneven. This is not sandy ground that God has given us to stand on. No, He's given us a firm foundation for which to plant ourselves in our basic warrior stance and get ready to fight. And then in all circumstances, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. Holding up the shield of faith. When we do that to the world, showing their faith, it will help not only extinguish the flaming arrows for us, but I think give people encouragement to do the same thing for themselves. To encourage and edify, as we talked about during your class. Verse 17, take up the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. The helmet of salvation protects your mind. And here's what I think about with this. Remember who you are. You see helmets of old. They were flashy, right? They were shiny, and they had all kinds of weird stuff on them. And why? It was to signify who they were. So when I looked at them, I know that that's a Roman, or that that's a Spartan, or I know they're from this unit or that. It signifies who you are. Listen to me. Put on that helmet, the salvation that you have, the security of that salvation. You are from God. You are saved. You are forgiven. You are redeemed. You are from God. You bear His name. So wear His helmet proudly. And the sword of the Spirit, of course, is the Word. You got to be in the Word. And the sword is great because it's not just a defensive, but it's an offensive weapon as well. We are to take the fight to the enemy. And the way we do that is getting out of our own comfort zone, out of the confines of this building, going into the community, and wielding that sword with faith. And I love verse 18. Praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints. You have to be praying. I don't know how often you pray or when you pray, but I guarantee you it's not enough. It's just not. And what you're praying for is just as important as the amount of prayer that you do. Prayer for anything is great, but you need to be praying for each other. Christians, you need to be praying for each other. You have to. And you got to seek out people who need it. I mean, I guarantee you there are people in this room that have felt the power of prayer. I have recently. As you know, my dad went through a major medical procedure in the last 2 weeks, and my mom and I and several of us had talked about it before. I just remember how calm I was when they're like, oh, we're going to do a triple bypass surgery. I'm like, cool. No big deal. Just a life-altering surgery. Anything could happen. And I remember sleeping like a baby. Normally, I would be so caught up with stress and all this other stuff, I wouldn't be able to eat, worried about it. But I just wasn't. Now, at first, I thought I was just stupid, like didn't want to. You crazy person! You don't understand how real this is. You're stupidly not getting the picture. But I really think it's because I know there were so many people, not just here, but in our congregation and lots of places, that were just praying for him, and they were probably saying this very same words: pray for peace for his family. That's me, and I felt it. Okay? It works. But it only works if you do it. Again, we talked about that verse, James chapter 5, about the power of prayer. Remember that. It's incredibly important. And this armor of God we just talked about, these are essentials. These are not like non-negotiables. And it's the whole armor too. You can't just walk out there with the helmet and the sword and think you're going to be safe. No, you need all of it. All of it. Put all of it on. You would never leave the confines of your base out in enemy territory without all of your armor. That would be suicide. Why would you do that? Don't do that. Take it all with you. And this armor is given to us not just to survive, but to thrive, living with eternity in mind. Every time you wield the shield of faith, every time you pray, every time you're in the Word and the sword, using the sword, you are declaring to the world that the battle belongs to the Lord. His victory is yours. Now, we'll move on to the most important part of the lesson, in my opinion, and that is trying to understand who the enemy is. This is, again, not something that we like to do because it's ugly. It's ugly. In fact, Sun Tzu, he describes in his book, The Art of War, about the mastery of war. How do you master war? And the supreme art of war, he says, is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And this is probably the greatest tactic of our adversary, the devil. How many people has he subdued by never fighting them at all? How many people? The best thing that the devil does is he tries to convince people that he does not exist, that the spiritual warfare doesn't exist. In many ways, we as a culture, we've reduced him to a cartoon character. I mean, I can remember watching Saturday morning cartoons, and the devil represented in those old school cartoons, he was red, he had a tail, he had horns, he had a pitchfork, and he walked around going, all the time. That was the devil. We made a cartoon of him. But people, he's real. He's not a cartoon. He's not a figment of mine or your imagination. He's real. This is who he is. Here's another one of his tactics. All warfare is based on deception. That's all the devil does. He lies, he steals, and he kills. That's all he does. That's it. This is who the Bible tells us that he is. 1 Thessalonians 2 and verse 18, because we're going to learn about some of the names he's called and what those names mean and what he does. This is what he does. Because we wanted to come to you, I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us. Our adversary is known as a hinderer. He tries to get in the way of God's plans. He tries to circumvent them. He creates problems. We talked a little bit about it this morning about church unity. Oh my goodness, does Satan get in the way of this or try? I mean, this is something that we all try to do as local congregation, is to pursue unity and togetherness. And Satan tries to hinder that all the time. Don't let him do that. He tries to oppose the plans of God as a hinderer. Satan is also known in 1 Peter 5, chapter 5, verse 8. Again, your adversary, the devil, prowling around like a lion. He is prowling. In other versions, this adversary word is translated as slanderer. You know what that is, right? Someone who slanders someone. He tells lies. He whispers lies. He seeks to ruin reputations. He stirs up gossip, wants to ruin marriages, wants to drive disciples of Christ away from God. Isaiah 14, talking about this all warfare based on deception. This one's kind of interesting. In Isaiah, he says this in chapter 14, verse 12, "How are you fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn? How are you cut out? How are you cut down to the ground? You who laid the nations low." Because the devil doesn't really show up to us the way that he really is. Because if he showed up to you the way that he really is, if you saw his true character, you'd run for the hills, and you wouldn't need me or anyone else to tell you why that's a good idea. But he doesn't show up like that. He shows up like a day star, the son of dawn. In other translations, it's called the shining one. In other translations, it's called Lucifer. That's who he is. He shows up and makes sin look good. He makes you believe that sin feels good. That's what he does. He doesn't show up as ugly. He shows up as beautiful because he's trying to deceive you. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 24, he's known as Beelzebul, the prince of demons. This word is translated as the god of filth, the lord of the flies. He takes all that is good and he perverts it. There's nothing wrong with, we talk about Thanksgiving. There's nothing wrong with food in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with ambition or rest or sexual intimacy. If they're done in the right place, in the right context, those are blessings from God. Those are things we do to honor God. But when the devil, who's the accuser, the tempter, when he slanders this Lord of the flies, this God of filth, he twists and perverts those things and makes them ugly and actually dishonors God. We have to be very careful. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 15, he's known as Belial. And Belial is this force that takes away attention from God. Just deviates people from worshiping God to worship other things. Now, maybe we don't see people today worshiping false gods like an idol, like a golden calf. But let me just briefly tell you, everybody worships something. Everybody. Don't ever let an atheist or someone else say, we don't worship anything. That's a lie. They just don't know it. Everybody worships something. Sometimes it's money, it's success, it's power, it's self, and all this Belial, this Satan tries to do is to get you to do any of those things. Any of those things other than God. And our culture hums along quite well in supporting that. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 19, he's known as the evil one. His influence corrupts everything he touches. He is behind every single and every evil act that shocks us. 1 Thessalonians 3 and verse 5, "For this reason, when I could hear it no longer, I said, learn about your faith for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you and our labor would be in vain." The tempter. He takes the desires that are God-given and he corrupts them. We just talked about that. He tempts you to believe, this is not that bad. You don't really believe that. I mean, that was the first thing we see, first act we see of him in Genesis. Genesis chapter 3, when sin entered into the world. You don't actually believe that you're going to die. I mean, look at that fruit. It's awesome. Tempts you, and he dishonors. He takes very common things and uses them to dishonor God. And then Revelation chapter 12, verse 10. "And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying," I misspelled another word, "Now the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down." The accuser. He condemns. He's so pervasive at this. He brings up sins in your life that you've already been forgiven of. He brings up the sins of other people that they've already been forgiven of. And he just starts gossip and starts to make you doubt. He tells you that you're a failure, that you're worthless, that you aren't worthy of God's love. And unfortunately, so many people, so many Christians believe it. And that's why, again, at final thought, Jesus calls him in John chapter 8, verse 44, he is a murderer and the father of lies. All he does is lie. The truth does not reside in him. This is the enemy. This is your enemy, folks. Learn a little bit about yourself and where you come from and who you are. This is who you're fighting. Now you tell me if you want to go out to that battlefield without that armor, without Christ, and without your allies on your side. I don't. The devil does not care that you came to church today. Listen, he does not care. He doesn't care that you believe in God. He believes in God. His minions, you can read in the Bible about demons who know who Jesus is, and they what? They trembled. They know who he is. They don't care that you believe in him. They don't care. Satan does not care at all. What he cares about is whether or not you've been transformed in here. That's what he's trying to stop. That's what he cares about. You have to be very careful. He doesn't care that you believe in God. He wants you to stay wrapped in bitterness, chained to your failures, continuing to submit to empty pleasures, that it will just be easy for you to forget the salvation and the guarantee of salvation that you have as people of God. This is how he fights. We need to have our eyes fixed on eternity. I think that will help us to see and help us not be distracted as we go about our walk and go about this fight every day. But we don't fight like Satan. We don't use those principles that Sun Tzu wrote about deception. We don't do that. We don't have to do that. That's what Satan has to do to us. But in our spiritual battle, we don't need to do that. We fight from victory, not for it. At the cross, Jesus crushed him, and Paul said it this way in Colossians 2, verse 15. He dismayed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. Basically, those rulers and authorities, those demons that were on earth, those minions of Satan, they were crushed. I used to think as a kid that it was Satan that condemned me, that could send me to hell, that could punish me. I don't know if you've thought that ever in your life, but that's not true. He does not have that power. He doesn't have it. Only God can do that. And I like to say that Satan's powerful, but he's only as powerful as you let him be in your life. He can be a giant, a Goliath, if you want him to be. Or he can be a nothing, if you want him to be. You can do that if you choose. And I think what helps us is, again, remembering a little bit about who you are. Here's a couple verses I call refrigerator verses, or verses you put over your door as you walk out of your room in the morning. Here they are. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them. For he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Isn't that awesome? I love that verse. Just try to remember who you are a little bit. I can remember being discouraged one time as a Marine dealing with something. And I had a friend of mine who was a fellow lieutenant, and he said, "Hey, don't you remember who you are? You're a Marine. Stand up, put your shoulders back, stand up for yourself. That's it. You're from God. You bear his name. Don't you be afraid." And then 1 John chapter 5, verses 4 and 5, for everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? The victory is not uncertain. There's no suspense about how this ends. There's no suspense. The victory belongs to every child of God. Revelations 12 and 11. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of your testimony, for they have loved not their lives even unto death. The Christians you here love the Lord so much that they'd rather die because they know that their eternity is secure. To live for Christ is great, but to die for him is gain, right? We're the only ones that can say that. We're the only ones who can say that. I use that power, that understanding, to stand firm and resist the devil and his schemes. And if you do that, if you finally decide, look, I know it's hard, but I'm going to put on this armor of God, and I'm going to walk outside this door, and I'm going to go to war, and I'm going to stand. If you do that, here's what happens. And I want you to remember, this is a guarantee, not a maybe, not an if, not a might. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. It's one of those interesting things where if you keep doing something, you just get better at it, right? It just becomes your routine. If you keep resisting the devil, he'll stop wasting time on you. Now, you have to be prepared. He'll come. I had somebody one time, an uncle of mine, in his time in Vietnam, he had a sergeant tell him, said, "You want to know how to get out of here alive?" He's like, "Yes, please tell me." He's like, "The enemy will attack you when you least expect it. The enemy will attack you when you least expect it." And that's true. You got to be expecting. You got to be ready for it. But the more and more you resist, the guarantee is he will flee from you. And I don't mean just backpedal. This says flee. That means run. You're going to run like the coward he is. So resist. You can do it. We just talked about all the things you have at your disposal to resist. You can do it. And again, I don't see any wishy-washy stuff in there. Oh, I tried. And I don't see. You see that in that verse? It's a guarantee. It's not a might. It's not a maybe. He will flee from you. When you bow down to God and you stand firm against the devil, there is no suspense about how this will end. Our role is to live faithfully in the fact that Jesus has secured us victory through the cross. This is how we are supposed to live with eternity in view. But again, I want to talk about how many of us are tortured by the accuser, tormented by the accuser. This little voice that just keeps going in our head sometimes. It makes us think that we aren't worthy of God's love. He brings up things that were past failures. He helps us to try and doubt our future. And that voice can be relentless, I know. I'm not, and again, there may be some in this room and plenty of other people out there. I'm just not going to try today. Say he just wins. It's so hard. I want to urge you to discern which thoughts come from the accuser and which thoughts come from the comforter. If the thoughts that you're having are not in line with the things that God tells us through His Word, then you need to be careful about how much room you're giving Satan in your mind. You've heard that old Native American saying, I think it's attributed to the Cherokee, but basically the thought is that within every man or woman, there are two wolves constantly in battle against each other, a good one and an evil one. And the young boy asked an elder of his tribe, he said, "Well, how do you know which one wins? Or how do you know which one is winning?" And the older man said, "Whichever one I feed the most." What thoughts are you listening to? Who are you listening to? Are you listening to the accuser? Or are you listening to the comforter? So you can believe the lies of the tempter, the accuser. You can fall prey to the roaring lion that's out there because he is out there. Or you can remember, again, that you are from God. You are a child of God. And your God is bigger than the one that's in the world, as we read. He is stronger than you could ever imagine. He loves you. He loves you. He wants you to fight and win. And He has given you everything you need to do so. This is the hope we Christians have. Christians have this. We have this. And I think we need to focus on that. And I think it will allow us to fight this war on behalf of ourselves, each other as Christians, and for this community as a local church. And we can fight it with cheerful hearts because in the end, the battle belongs to the Lord. The war's already over. We just have to keep our head down and keep moving, keep fighting. I don't know how many times I've been in rooms where you're planning for something or orders. I've never, ever, 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 ever heard my commander say, "Hey, we've already won. We've already won. We just got to go out here and go through the motions." Because there is no guarantee of victory on the battlefield. Zero. None. Doesn't matter how good you are, how good you think you are. There's zero guarantee. But this battle plan that we have, this armor that we have, that's what God is telling us. You've already won. The war's over. You just got to go out and keep moving forward. I would love to have that. But as a means of invitation, sorry I went a few minutes over. I just got to tell you as Christians, keep your head down. Keep moving forward. I don't mean keep your head down like hiding. I mean lean into it. Put on the armor of God and keep moving. Work with each other. Continue to build that unity together. Go out to the community and find where there's a gap in Satan's defenses and attack it. And attack it hard, with a cheerful heart, with tact, with a good attitude, with love for other people. You do those things, these seats will always be filled. You'll be knocking out that back wall, maybe looking for another building. Because I tell you right now, there's so many people who are crying, trying to fill that God-sized hole in their heart. You have that opportunity now to do that. Anytime you read in the Bible, like you see today, anytime that there is a riot against God or against things that are spiritual, it's followed by revival. Riot, revival, riot, revival. You may see all these evil things that are going on in the world, and you may be thinking as a Christian, I want to do something. I want revenge. I want revenge for who did this to these children or this person I care about. I want revenge. Well, as Christians, you know what our revenge looks like? Revival. You bring more people to Christ. That's what you do. And you don't do it with hate. It doesn't work. You do it with love. That's how we're going to win this fight. That's how we're going to win the fight in your heart and how you can help someone win the fight in their own. Because that's where the battlefield is. And you can do it. You can do it. If you're here and you're not a Christian, I really hate to tell you, but you don't have this armor. You are literally walking in a battlefield, unarmed. Who in their right mind would do that? I would argue that you're listening to the tempter and the accuser who's telling you, I don't really exist. There's not really a spiritual war going on. Why do you need armor? I'm not shooting at you. I'm telling you, that's what he wants you to believe. That is his tactic. That is his goal. We just talked about it. The only thing Satan does is lie, steal, and kill. That's it, period. He doesn't do anything else. It may feel like he's encouraging you. It may feel good to do these sinful things, but that's not. That's of the devil. And unfortunately, if you're not a Christian, if you are not in Christ, you're walking in that battlefield unarmed, and Satan is beating you every single day. Every single day. You have the opportunity to fix that right now. A great opportunity. All things are ready. All the thing you have to do is this, very simple. You need to believe in your heart that Jesus is who he said he was. Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. You've heard the word. If you believe it, if you decide, I'm not going to be the person I was when I first walked in here. Repent of those sins, but confess that Jesus is who he said he was. You can come up here. I'll be waiting on you. We'll baptize you today, wash away your sins, and you can begin a new life. You can be a new soldier in the army of God. And all of these people who are here for you, your allies, will help you access that Holy Spirit that we're told will be given to you. It's a guarantee. The Holy Spirit will come to you. It will help you better understand the Word. It will help your relationships. It will help you better understand how to use that armor and that sword that God has given you to do battle, and you can take the fight to the enemy and win. And that's what every Christian and Jesus and God want for you every single day. So won't you do that while we take this opportunity, while we stand and sing?